Hi, my name is Bob and welcome to the homestead, y'all. Today we're going to propagate some of our bee balm. This is a pink bee balm. We have 4 different colors of bee balm, and I like to propagate it in the springtime. They do real well. It's April here in Tennessee, and this is a great time of year when you get a few warm days to come out and take some cuttings off your bee balm. Now, you can propagate bee balm 3 different ways. You can start it by seed, you can take cuttings like we're going to do here today, or you can take and dig up this whole mound and split them with roots already on them, which that's a good method if your bee balm's getting overgrown and you need to go ahead and cut it back. But this isn't. This we planted last year. This was a 4-inch pot. And you can see it did wonderful last year. It grew up good, it bloomed well, it's multiplied and grown all winter long. So I'm going to go ahead and take some cuttings off of this. What you're going to need to take cuttings is a good pair of pruning scissors, or if you have a sharp pair of scissors, just make sure you dip it in alcohol so you don't transmit any disease. And then some kind of container with water. This is just a cut-off water bottle that has water in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to get right down here as close to the ground as we can. I'm going to go around the outside of this and take about 10 more cuttings, so that way this year, once these root, I can move them around the main garden spot. That's where we're at. Here's the main garden spot. You can see our cover crops are doing good. There's some winter wheat, there's some peas growing here, there's clover, chicory, all our favorite cover crops. If you're not familiar with growing cover crops in your garden, go to our channel and go to organic gardening or sustainable gardening, and we have tons of videos on there of using cover crops to improve your soil. But today, let's focus mainly on these. You can see I tied a piece of yarn on these last year, so that way I knew where they were and I wouldn't cut them down with my weed eater. I do have some garlic growing. You can see garlic around the edge of this fence. One of our big boars got loose and got into our garlic bed and just rooted up the garlic. He didn't eat the garlic, but he rooted it all up. So I had to transplant a lot of those bulbs, and I just brought them out here in the main garden. And I think I planted around 200 bulbs around the outside of the garden. So that'll help give us plenty of garlic for a long time to come. But I'll grab the camera, I'll zoom in closer, and I'll show you how I do this. When you go to take your cuttings off your bee balm, what I like to do is get right down to the dirt. Most of the time, each one of these pieces of bee balm have roots on it already. So if you can cut right down to the dirt and get a piece of that root, it'll propagate a lot easier. So we'll just cut that one off. And you can see this one already has little 5 roots started. So that's going to propagate real easy. So we'll take that and we'll put it in our water, and we'll go ahead and get us a couple more here and try to get, I like to get about 8 or 10 of these if I can. There's another one. You see it's got a small one on it, but it already has roots also. So we'll just go through here and we'll go ahead and cut several that away. And if you can cut the main stalk on it and pull it a little bit, you can see, look at the roots on that. So that's really ready to go directly in soil. We'll put him in here. Now if you get them with roots on them, I definitely would put them directly in soil. But if not, I like to leave them in the water for a few days, let them soak up as much moisture as they can, and then I'll transplant them into soil. But you can see the roots on that one. These are going to transplant just fine right directly into soil. We'll get us a few here, and then we'll go over to the potting table and I'll show you the next step. Okay, now let's take our cuttings over to the potting table and I'll show you what we do next. So the next thing we want to do after we take our cuttings is we want to strip most of the leaves off of these. If you have a fingernail or thumbnail, you can just take and pinch that leaf off. If not, you can take a good pair pruning scissors and prune those 2 leaves off right as close to the stem as you can get. You can see, if you pinch it off, you can get right up next to it. And then these top leaves, if they're very big, I'll take and I'll cut them in half. Of course, that wind's not wanting to cooperate. But I just cut them in half like that. And that way your cutting will do better. And you can see this one has roots on it, so I'll probably go ahead and put this one directly in soil. Let's look at a couple of these other ones. You can see these bottom leaves, we'll just pinch them off. Same with this set, and I'll just leave the top set. That one has roots, so we could probably put it directly in some good soil. I have a little bit of water in this red bucket here, so I can set the cuttings down in them as I pull them out. This cutting here, it has a good root mass, so it's definitely a great one to put directly in soil. So we'll pinch those bottom leaves off, pinch this next set of leaves off, and then I'm going to cut these top ones in half. This is a pretty big cutting, so I'll cut those in half. We're going to take every single one of these. We're going to do the same thing. Pinch the bottom leaves off and just leave the top set of leaves. Same with this one. Pinch the bottom ones off. I'm going to go ahead and pinch this set off also. Like I said, these are pretty big cuttings, so they're going to dry out real quick if we're not careful. And this little cutting here, we'll just leave this little guy in the water. We'll leave him in there for about a week, and then we'll go ahead and plant him in some soil. It usually takes, depending on the temperature, usually takes about 7 to 10 days and you'll start to see roots come out on these, kind of like a tomato plant. But I like to put them in water first most of the time so they can soak up all the moisture they can, and that just helps them root a little better. Now if you wanted, you could put some root tone on these. I'm not going to. I like trying not to use root tone when I can, but there's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with using root tone. I use it on our grapes, our blackberry cuttings, and our raspberry cuttings. But this soft green cuttings like these are real soft. They generally root pretty easy without root tone. But you can see how soft these are. They're flexible. You can see the roots on it. So we're going to take these with all the roots on them, and we're going to plant them directly in some soil. But for now, I'm going to put them back in the water, so that way they can soak up as much moisture as they can. Now they will droop for the first day or two after you plant them, but then they'll finally start pulling moisture up through the roots or through the stem, and they'll stand back up. Now I have some cuttings I did about 2 weeks ago. I'll show you what they look like. Here's some cuttings I took a couple weeks ago. I did trim some more leaves off of them yesterday, but I literally took these cuttings when it was snowing out. I took these cuttings, I planted them in dirt. You can see there's a small one there and a big one there, a small one and a big one, and there's another small one right here. But when I took these cuttings, I put some in water and some in dirt. These I put directly in dirt, and then I put them in the barn in indirect sunlight. Now anytime you take cuttings like this, even these that we just took just now, Once I get them planted into pots like this, little 4-inch pots, I will put them somewhere where they get indirect sunlight, at least for about the first month. After the first month, then you can gradually go ahead and expose them to full sunlight and they'll do just fine. But you'll want to work them a little bit each day. You want to get them used to it and just put them out in the sun for a few hours a day, and then after a week or so of doing that, then they can go right into full sun and they'll do just fine. So let's get some more 4-inch pots and we'll get us some more potting soil and we'll go ahead and do up these cuttings we just took. This is the soil we're going to use. This is Pro Mix. I did have a little in here already mixed with sand. I'm going to mix it up a little. And then I'm going to add some more sand. This is just regular old sand. And I like using sand with my seeds, starting seeds. And when I do cuttings, sand helps hold your moisture real well. And it makes it a little bit lighter, fluffier, easier for the tender roots to grow in. Now I did add a little bit of worm castings to this. I don't like to add any fertilizer usually, any organic fertilizer to the soil, because those young tender roots burn real easy if you put something with a lot of nitrogen in it. But worm castings is nice and gentle, gives them just enough to feed on. And I'll show you the container I used. And actually I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of this, but I put 1.5 of these. You can see how big that is. I'm just going to put the rest of these worm castings in here and mix them up real good. So that makes 2 of these that I've put in this potting mix. And like I said, that just gives them a little bit of nutrients. If you have some good compost that's composted real well, you could put a little compost in there, which I do, but I'm just going to use that worm castings. So that's about 1/5 sand, maybe 1/6 worm castings or less, and then the rest just regular Pro Mix. So let's get some 4-inch pots and we'll go ahead and pot these things up. So we'll take our 4-inch pot, just put enough soil in it to get to the top. Now I'm not going to pack it yet. I'm going to wait and go ahead and put my cutting in. So I'm just going to make me a small hole. And I left that about 1 inch from the bottom. So now I'm going to pack this. Now this is dry soil. And we'll water it from the top a little bit, and then we're going to set it in a pan of water and let it soak up all the water that it wants from underneath. That's my favorite way to water anything, any kind of plant, is from underneath. If I can keep from it, I try not to water it from the top. I will this first time just so it helps get the soil packed around the cutting. There we go. I like to leave a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the top. That way if I do water it from the top, I don't have to worry about any soil running over. That's what our cutting looks like. So let me do one more on camera, and the rest I'll just do a time lapse of. So as you can see, just use loose soil. Take our finger, make a hole just about to the bottom. I like to leave about 1 inch. You can see the tender roots, so we don't want to hurt those. We don't want to disturb them. And then we'll just lightly pack the soil around it. Now over here on the edges, I'll pack it a little tighter, but in the center where the roots are, I just barely push down. Just like that. So I'll do the rest of these on time lapse real quick, and then we'll come back and I'll show you what the next step is. Okay, now the next step, once you get them all planted, is get you some kind of pan or a tub. You can see I have a little aluminum pan here. This isn't but about a 1/2 inch, maybe an inch thick. And I've poured some water in it out of my watering container, and I'm going to let these set for 2 to 3 hours. Let them soak up as much moisture as they can. We're going to go ahead and water them from the top of the watering can just so the dirt gets around the stem real well. But we'll leave them here for a few hours. We'll let them soak up the water, and then we're going to take and put them in indirect sunlight. We don't want them in direct sunlight because they'll dry out quicker. It'll burn them up. They'll lose a lot more moisture, and we don't want that. We want them to retain as much moisture as they can have. Now, these will droop for the first day, but after the first day, as long as they have plenty of moisture, you should see them start to perk up and stand up. Another thing I like to do is spray them with a water bottle. I'll go around and I'll mist them a couple times a day, or every time I walk by them, I'll just leave the water bottle laying right by them, and I'll spray the leaves and the stem and the top of the soil with a little bit of water. Now, after about 2 weeks, these should be rooted well. You'll see in the bottom of the 4-inch pot, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the temperature, you'll start to see roots. Once you see roots in the bottom of that 4-inch pot, coming out these holes in the bottom, once you see roots right here, then you can go ahead and plant them into your garden, or your flower bed, wherever you're going to plant them, or in a pot, if you want to plant them in a pot. The critical thing is to keep plenty of moisture. Now, if these were smaller cuttings to where I could put a dome over them to keep the humidity in, I would probably go ahead and do that. That would help them. But as long as you come through and spray them a couple times a day, it shouldn't be any problem whatsoever. Even these bigger cuttings, these are big for cuttings. These will perk up in a couple days, and they'll be beautiful plants. Okay, it's been 2 weeks since we took our cuttings. They're doing great. See this one here, I can tell they're rooted because this was the original top leaves. This was these, and this was the second set that I cut in half. So you can see they've grown that much, added that much growth. I can't see any roots in the bottom yet. Of course, 2 weeks is pretty quick. It'll probably take them another couple weeks before I see roots in the bottom, and then they'll be ready to plant. So we've had 100% success rate taking our bee balm cuttings this way. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And as always, thanks for watching.